So now for Gongchik. Last week we looked at the section where first, the difference between insider and outsider, so to say. Here translated as non-Buddhist, Buddhist. Buddhist being literally Nangba, the insiders. And then the others, those who are not insiders, so outsiders. So here translated as Buddhist and non-Buddhist. And so we looked at what the difference, how to differentiate. And Kyopa emphasizes that what differentiates is not, what kind of fancy philosophy you have. Also not like, whether you believe in compassion or not. Because he says, many other traditions and systems believe in compassion. In that sense, it's like compassion is a universal thing. So in trying to clarify and to make clear who is or isn't Nangpa, insiders following the inside way, you have to come up with, or you have to identify, right, a definition of what is Nangpa, what is an insider, in a way that is meaningful. And so for Kyopa, he says, refuge, having and not having refuge is that determinant. Refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Then we also looked at the next differentiation, the next way of drawing that line. And that is between, once you are Nangpa, then the next question that comes up is greater or lesser vehicle. So here, greater or lesser vehicle is again not defined as, is your view more profound, more vast, or less, but rather it is to be found in, do you advocate the generation of bodhicitta or not? So any and all teachings that advocate, so to say, that teaches the importance of generating bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings, that is a great vehicle. And those teachings of the Buddha who do not explicitly state that as the goal, that is called the lesser vehicle. Now today we look at the next statement that is in this style, which is then, once you're now, right, you say, okay, follower of the great vehicle, believe strongly in the necessity of generating bodhicitta for the benefit of all beings. Then now the question is, within this context, how do you differentiate between practicing only the sutra teachings and practicing the mantra teachings as well? And so here, the statement itself says, statement 122, the difference between the sutra and mantra traditions is empowerment. Is there or isn't there empowerment? So Khenpo Kunpal's commentary. Furthermore, the difference between sutra and mantra traditions should not be distinguished in terms of a comfortable, fast path, and so on. Instead, they should be distinguished mainly in terms of empowerment. And so here, Khenpo Kunpal says, some people might distinguish between sutra and mantra by saying, oh, the mantra path is really fast, really swift. And therefore, kind of risky and dangerous. In contrast, the sutra path, may not be so fast, but it's comfortable. It doesn't have that many risks compared to the mantra system. And, some might say, oh, the difference between sutra and mantra. Mantra has more profound, like wisdom, more profound view than the sutra system. Here also, Kyopa doesn't accept that. So here, Kyopa Rinpoche says the difference is to be distinguished by way of is empowerment utilized or not. So all the great vehicle teachings that do not require, do not involve either the receiving or the practicing of empowerment, they are then the general sutra tradition. The great vehicle teachings that emphasize, that uses, that trains with empowerment, that is the secret mantra tradition of the great vehicle. So the great vehicle has these two traditions. Sometimes the sutra tradition is also called the perfection tradition, the paramita tradition, and secret mantra tradition. And sometimes the paramita tradition is also called the vehicle of characteristics. And so vehicle of characteristics, perfection vehicle, paramita, and sutra. These three are synonyms in this context, meaning they are in contrast to secret mantra. And the secret mantra category has more consistently, the writers would use secret mantra. In the West, we say Vajrayana. Actually, the term Vajrayana is not used so commonly, interestingly. Yeah? More commonly in the traditional writings, they call a secret mantra. Sangha. Sang is secret or esoteric. Nga is mantra. Sangha. Sangha Tekpa Chenpo, which is the great vehicle secret mantra. So continuing, Khenpo Kunpal quotes the Manjushri Root Tantra. Quote, a mantrayana practitioner who wishes to be a yogi, meaning a practitioner, yogi simply means practitioner, one who engages in yoga, in the practice of unity. A mantra practitioner who wishes to be a yogi, without having seen the mandala, is like someone who punches space with his fists and drinks the water of a mirage. So punching space with the fist, meaning it's kind of pointless. You're not punching anything. Drinking mirage water, a mirage is on a very hot day, driving on the highway with no cars, not much cars, and very hot day, you might see a vision of like water coming up, but that's a mirage. You cannot drink that water, So without having seen the mandala, this line, right? A mantrayana practitioner who wishes to be a yogi without having seen the mandala is like someone who punches space with his fists and drinks the water of a mirage. So seeing the mandala is the same as receiving empowerment. So to properly receive an empowerment, you have to see the mandala, enter the mandala, and be initiated, be empowered within the mandala. In less detailed empowerment rituals, seeing the mandala, entering the mandala, receiving empowerment within the mandala is not explicitly laid out in many more concise empowerments, which are probably the type of empowerments that most of us have received. But it's understood there that you have to see the mandala, enter the mandala, be in the mandala in order to receive empowerment. So that quote from Manjushri Root Tantra. Now Khenpo Kunpal continues. He says, likewise, the four classes of tantras are held to be distinguished gradually in terms of their empowerments. So here is a reference to how, and within all the different tantras that the Buddha taught, they can be divided into four classes. And so you might have read somewhere else, heard somewhere else. There is what is known as the action tantra, which is the preliminary of the four, the beginning level, action tantra, then performance tantra, then yoga tantra, then unexcelled yoga tantra. So tantras like Vajra, Kalachakra, Chakra Samvara, Vajra Yogini, these all belong to the highest yoga tantra. So then there are others that belongs to the action tantra. So here he says these four classes of tantra and how they are distinguished one from the other is how detailed and extensive the empowerments are. So in action tantra, the empowerment is brief and fairly straightforward. Performance tantra empowerments, more involved. Yoga tantra, more involved. Unexcelled yoga, most detailed. With most kind of subsection for everything. So this is the commentary that Khenpo Kunpal has for statement 22. Then in terms of receiving empowerment, generally in the secret mantra teachings, it says, if you have not entered the mandala, if you have not received empowerment, then you do not have the requirements needed to practice secret mantra. So I think a lot of times we wonder about this and we think, oh, and often, if you hang out in Vajrayana Buddhist centers, or Buddhist centers that practice Vajrayana, sometimes you might hear people, talking about this, and specifically, kind of talking about, I have this empowerment, I don't have that empowerment, you have this empowerment, you don't have that empowerment, this and that, like, I don't have this empowerment, can I practice this? Oh, they have that empowerment, they can practice, whereas those others don't have that empowerment, cannot practice, and this and that, right? So you might hear about things like this. So this is not such a necessarily clear matter. Some who are very detail oriented and want to make sure that all the rules, all the requirements are fulfilled exactly without any, shortcut and everything. So the most kind of rigorous view would be the one that says, for every practice, for every secret mantra practice, let me put it that way, secret mantra, for any and every secret mantra practice, that practice comes from that sadhana, let's say, daily sadhana practice. It comes from a particular empowerment text, and that empowerment text comes from a particular tantra associated with a particular deity. And so in order to practice that sadhana, you have to receive the specific empowerment in which this sadhana is based on. And so it's not enough, if you said, well, I have received, for example, Avalokiteshvara empowerment. They say, no, it's not enough yet. Because this particular sadhana of Avalokiteshvara is connected to this particular empowerment text of Avalokiteshvara. And so in order to practice this sadhana, you have to receive the empowerment that this sadhana is based on. So that's the strictest. So there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of sadhanas associated with thousands and thousands and thousands of empowerment texts. Then from one empowerment text, you can derive several different lengths of sadhanas as well. Then a more general, a more relaxed view, perhaps, you could say that, is, and this one, one of our teachers, Kyabje Nubar Rinpoche. Nubar Rinpoche is the senior most Lama at this monastery in Nepal called Rinchen Drigung Kagyo Monastery, outside of Boulder. If you take a taxi, take a van out there, less than half an hour, despite traffic being really crazy, because this goes away from the Kathmandu direction, so less crazy the traffic. Within half an hour, you'll get to this monastery. These days, Rinpoche are mostly at the retreat center, and not so much at the monastery. Anyway, I remember Nubar Rinpoche himself saying, yes, there's, various different opinions about, can you or cannot, practice this sadhana and that sadhana based on what requirements. He very humbly says, there are many different views, different opinions, so you should check with your teacher if you, are going to practice something. He says, but in his view, he says, the minimum requirement for practicing any sadhana is that each sadhana will belong to one of the 4 levels of Tantra. Action Tantra, performance, yoga, and highest yoga. So then he says, in his opinion, if you have received properly an empowerment belonging to the action Tantra level, then all action Tantra sadhanas you can practice. But you should receive the reading, transmission, and instructions for how to practice the sadhana. So the empowerment requirement is covered by, as long as you have received one sadhana, one empowerment from the action Tantra level, then you have fulfilled the empowerment requirement. But as you know, to properly practice, empowerment is one of 3. Second requirement is the particular sadhana that you practice, you should receive the reading transmission or the oral transmission, the lung. Then you should receive actual instructions to say, okay, now over here, this is what it means, and this is how you practice. Then this section, this is what it means, and this is how you should practice. The tree. Tree means the guidance, the guiding instructions. And so then if you have received one highest yoga Tantra empowerment, then the sadhanas within that category, you have the empowerment requirement, but you should get the reading transmission of the particular practice text from someone who has that reading transmission, and then you should receive instructions. Now, a slightly more strict view says that a modification of this position is action Tantra level, performance Tantra level, yoga Tantra level. Yes, this applies. But when we get to the highest yoga, you need to, if this is going to be a Chakra Samvara practice, if you have received a Vajra empowerment, you should not practice Chakra Samvara yet until you also receive the Chakra Samvara. or if you have received the Kala Chakra, you should not practice like Vajrakilaya until you have received the Vajrakilaya empowerment. Then you can see how it can get more strict and more strict and more strict, which is something like, oh, you have received a Vajra empowerment, and now you want to practice? Well, what form of Vajra highest yoga empowerment you have received? Oh, I have received the, two-arm form of Vajra in union with Nairatmya. And then it says, oh, no. This Vajra sadhana is the 9 deity, not just single in union with Nairatmya. Single in union with Nairatmya, then there are 8 Dakinis. And it's like, oh no, then you need the 9 deity Vajra system. Receive that empowerment before you can practice this sadhana. So there are more and more kind of strict. Then, on the very, I guess you could say, maybe relax, another form of that is to say, if you have received one highest yoga tantra empowerment, that covers all the lower levels. So there is the most permissive view, I guess you could say, if you have received one, say you have received the Kala Chakra from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, then any of the other lower Tantra sadhanas, if you receive the reading transmission and instructions, then you are qualified. So I think in the end, qualified or not, again, I think here Kyopa will say, I mean, not specifically this question, but you can see that, Kyopa always says, qualify or not in the end. Yes, there is the interdependence on qualifications that are based on other conditions and qualifications that are based on own condition. When other condition and own condition comes together, meets, that's most suspicious. Meaning, not only do you have the other condition of attending, say, an empowerment of Kala Chakra by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, some great Lama like that, but your own condition, meaning your karmic bank is loaded, it's good, right? And then because of that, you are spiritually prepared to benefit from receiving that empowerment in a more immediate way. Then, when those two come together, it's very good. But of the two conditions, the other condition and the own condition, Kyoba Rinpoche often emphasizes, your own condition is something that is more fundamental. So you should keep improving yourself, so to say, and not worry so much about the other condition, conditions provided by others, other conditions, own conditions, self-condition, and the ones that you can work on. So don't waste, your energy lamenting or complaining or feeling bad that the other conditions are not there. Oh, I really want this empowerment. I want to attend this, but then I cannot. Oh, because the teacher doesn't come here. Oh, the teacher's people charge a lot of money for this empowerment, for this program. Oh, la la la, all of that. Don't complain about other condition. Work on the own condition. In a way, when the own condition is strong and robust enough, it will attract the other conditions to come. Now 123. 123 says, if either one of these two is lacking, it is impossible to attain perfect awakening. And what are the two? The two is talking about the sutra teachings, the sutra tradition, and the other is the secret mantra tradition. So statement 23 is basically saying, in order to attain perfect awakening, perfect Buddhahood, you need both sutra and secret mantra. So what is emphasized here is that it's not so much, you should not think, oh, I'm going to go the sutra way, and I'm not going to touch the secret mantra things. Or I'm only practicing secret mantra. I'm not going to bother with sutra. So Khenpo says, no, you need both. So these are not two choices, not two possibilities. You should understand that they are two requirements that will polish or clear two different levels of confusion. That the sutra teachings are for eliminating, getting rid of the coarser of faults, and the secret mantra is for eliminating the more subtle faults. So it's like an example I've used before. If you have a piece of wood, right, to prepare it to make it into a beautiful coffee table or desk or dining table, you have to polish this wood, the surface, in order to bring out, right, the natural beauty of this wood. So to do that, first you polish with coarse sandpaper. So you sand it down, the coarser one. So you sand, right? So then that will remove the coarser faults. But as you sand more and more, right, you cannot keep using the coarse one. Right? You have to use the finer sandpaper until the last level, when it's all shiny and when all the wood grain is showing, you have to use the most, fine. Even maybe using silk cloth to polish at the very end and put wax, polish with the wax final level. Using silk cloth, then all the beauty of that wood becomes obvious and comes out. And so the sutra tradition and the mantra, secret mantra tradition is analogous to this. And that's why to attain perfect enlightenment, perfect awakening, Khenpo here says you need both. Now, in the overview, right? Remember, I've been reading from there too. In the overview, interestingly, Rinchen Changchup called our attention to a particular statement found in chapter 8 that actually sounds like it's contradicting this statement in 23. So he says, the statement 123 should be combined with the statement 812. And what does 812 say? 812 says, due to the Dharma and the procedure of the practice, Buddhahood is one. So here it's emphasizing that Buddhahood is one. The state of being a complete Buddha is, there are no there is the sutra one and then there is the mantra one. Both, when they describe this state of Buddhahood, it's the same Buddhahood. But why there is the difference into sutra and secret mantra? It's because of the way this procedure of practice unfolds. Generally speaking, it unfolds in such a way that the coarser obstacles, the coarser obscuration is removed first, and therefore all the teachings that we associate with the sutra tradition, we use those. Then the coarser, the more fine faults that needs to be removed, we do that with the finer details of the secret mantra tradition. But the Dharma and Buddhahood is fundamentally one. Actually, the other statement that I'm thinking of in Rinchen Chanchup's guidance, he associates with the last verse. So the last verse, right? We say the difference between sutra and secret mantra is empowerment, right? So there Rinchen Chanchup says, now you have to read this 122 together with 811. Now 811 is really interesting because it seems to contradict. 811 seems to directly contradict 123. 123 says you need both, right? What does 811 says? 811 says, one can attain Buddhahood in one lifetime through the vehicle of characteristics. Remember, vehicle of characteristics is the perfection vehicle, is the sutra tradition. So elsewhere, Kyopa also says, even though in 123 he says, you need both to attain perfect Buddhahood. Elsewhere he says, actually, you can attain Buddhahood in one lifetime simply by just following the Sutrayana teachings. So of course, if you read this, you say, wait, so what is it? Right? I mean, we want to know, what is it, Isn't this a direct contradiction? Again, I think it's a direct contradiction only if you have been habituated into thinking that everything can literally be in agreement, everything can literally be understood and arranged in such a way that it's like mathematical, 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 1. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 1.5. 1 + 1 = 2. I think some of us really have this kind of attitude towards the Dharma. Overall, I would say this kind of attitude you find more among people, certain types of people who practicing Tibetan Buddhism. If they have studied a lot of like Lamrim and logic and philosophy, then they tend to think that everything in the teachings, are like this. 1 + 1 = 2. But if you're more exposed to, I would say, like a Zen tradition, you're a Zen practitioner, or even if you're a Theravada, then you don't have such a rigid mind, 1 + 1 must equals 2. No other possibility. So this 1 + 1 have to equals 2 comes from a particular strain of the Indo-Tibetan scholastic tradition, where everything has to be reconciled. Everything has to be explained away in such a way, using the logic of it's either yes or no, 1 or 0. But here, this statement, these two statements, yes, on the surface, they seem to contradict. And yes, in some ways, they contradict. But it's not the kind of contradiction that is ultimately a problem. Because here, even when he says, generally, the approach we should take is 123, which is lacking any one of these two, perfect enlightenment cannot be achieved. But then when we see that statement, we should not be dogmatic. No, we should understand, more importantly, we should understand why. Why is because the emphasis here is not so much, like, oh, secret mantra is really, 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 really important. And I have the empowerment and you don't have. Often it's a way to, show, how you're superior. No, not like that. Right? This is more about the purpose of the two types of teachings of the Great Vehicle, Sutra and Secret Mantra, is so that the coarser and the more subtle obscurations can be effectively eliminated, removed. And therefore, that's the main point there, when Kyopa says, both of these are important. Lacking at either of them, you cannot achieve Buddhahood, meaning if the two types of obscurations, the coarse and the fine or the subtle, if they are not completely removed, as long as there are obscurations, you are not going to be Buddha. Then when he says, even just practicing the vehicle of characteristics, meaning the sutra teachings, you can achieve Buddhahood in one lifetime. Right? What he's saying now here is, if you really have skill and sincerity, then even just practicing, or seemingly even just practicing the sutra vehicle, you can eradicate, you can eliminate both the coarse and the subtle obscurations. Why? Because elsewhere we already came across, right, the statements that say, in each of the vehicles, in each of the groupings, right, the teachings found in the other groupings are present. So then in that sense, within the sutra teachings, within the sutra collection, if you know how to practice, the special characteristics of mantra are found in there. So then it is possible. Don't underestimate, in other words. Don't underestimate the so-called more basic teachings of the sutra tradition. Because there are many subtle points in there that if we have the skill and we know how to practice, even just, quote-unquote, just practicing the sutra vehicle, you can achieve Buddhahood in one lifetime. Which is a very bold statement to make, especially in the context of Tibet. Tibetans very quickly got very excited about secret mantra. They like magic, like some of us get very excited with secret mantra, oh, this can happen, that can happen, this can happen, that can happen, purify so much, speed up so much, right? But here, Kyopa says, no, even just practicing sutra, if you know how to practice, you can eradicate, you can eliminate the confusion. So today, we will stop here.